This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Travis King. He's the founder of Land Investing Mastery. He's flipped land in 29 different states and hundreds of personal flips with his wife, Becca. Hundreds of joint ventures. He's done over 1,000. I think he mentioned over 1,300 one-on-one personal coaching calls. He leads a mastermind, well over 7 figures from land investing. He's the author of the Land Investors Playbook, which you'll hear us mention through the show a number of times. But Travis has really become the expert or the go-to in this space. And he is scaling, and it's interesting to see that growth. Where, man, it's always it seems to be. And as you listen to the show, you know it's the capital question, right? Of where does capital come from as we grow? And it's neat to hear that even in his business as he has scaled, and now partnering with investors as well to buy larger tracts and do bigger deals. And same thing happens in our multifamily space as well, right? It's always the capital and partnering with investors and doing right by investors. You're going to hear us talk about that a little bit, but really educating passive investors today on what is land flipping, what should you be looking for, as you are partnering with, say, an operator like Travis in this space, some things about how they're reaching out, how they're finding the deals, the things that you want that operator to be doing. You're going to hear about software he's using and ways that he's gathering information that most are probably not doing. You're going to learn a lot from Travis today. How often would you say you are, say, being hyper-focused on specific properties versus kind of more shotgun approach?
Yeah. Well, so what we learned when I initially, every education course I had went through or learned was approached at a spray and pray at the county level. And what we learned though is things would come back. We would find large acreage parcels that had subdivide opportunity, and then we did our first subdivide deal. And what I started to recognize is hey, it doesn't have to be like a fluke or an exception. I could get intentional. So we started mailing, properties that were only, let's say, 20 acres or larger, because then everyone that came back probably had subdivide potential, right? So we still were at a county level. We started mailing larger, and then we started taking a step farther and go, okay, well, when you subdivide, it's really nice if you have 2 roads, meaning two property boundaries have road access. That gives you more potential to carve things up. So we would then take our list and then we would even go, okay, let's disqualify the ones that only have road access on one side. So that allowed us to get, like you're saying, kind of more hyper targeted. And then we did some deals where we did a couple waterfront lot flips. And same thing, we were mailing at the county level, and we did some of the just beautiful case studies and drone photography and fun deals, big profitable deals. And they said, well, how do we get intentional about that? So we started building lists where we hunt and peck, and we will build an entire list at a county level of only vacant waterfront lots. So we now have that. That's kind of, and as I did that, and my wife and I did that, we kind of started to add plays to the playbook. And then I would have coaching clients, start to run these hyper targeted campaigns, like you're saying, for these specific, like that portfolio owner. You can pull data of only people that own 2 or 5 or 10. You pick your minimum number, instead of just targeting single parcel owners, you say, give me a list of only people that own 5 or more properties. Well, now every letter you send, right, every single person that responds, there's a lot of potential for outsized returns. So that's really where the book here that we're here to talk about, the Land Investors Playbook, that's literally what I built. It used to be Post-it notes, and then it was a Google Doc. And then I was sharing SOPs with coaching clients. And then it became, okay, I got to put this in book format. And it really is about running these unique individual plays, like targeting waterfront properties, targeting subdivide properties, targeting portfolio owners, right? Hyper targeting subdivisions and census tracts only versus at a county level. All of those came though from operating at a county level, and I just identifying opportunities and saying, hey, instead of this being an exception, how can we make this the norm, and how can we replicate this?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning your book too. I was going to ask you about it, but I just want the listeners, I've heard nothing but great things about your book. I've not read it yet personally, but I feel like if you're in this business, of land investing in any way. You got to have it. So, but one other question about kind of the process here as far as finding the land and getting responses. I'd heard somebody else ask about, and whether it's in this business or in ours as well, is the and actually you mentioned it a minute ago. Is it really the experimenting with the cold calling and texting and some of those as well? Or is that something that you see as going to be a necessary thing, in the near future? Like that's kind of a new way to get in front of more sellers, potential sellers. And then a second piece of that would be, I think there's ways too that obviously they're marked as spam now and whatnot, so they're not noticed, or they're blocked or whatnot. Is that a technique that you see is going to be beneficial in the near future, and how are you using it?
Yeah, I think so what you kind of you look at is you go, what is the cost per lead for marketing? When I look at my marketing budget, how much does it cost using one method versus the other? And direct mail is probably the most expensive marketing method out there, right? So it's spendy, but for us, if you track your acquisitions and your deals, you can't be fixated. Like in any business, there's vanity metrics, right? Like there's these metrics that we can like, oh, ROI, right? You might look at ROI, but it's like you buy something for $1, sell it for 11. Who cares about 1,000% ROI? It's $10. You know what I mean? So there's situations where like the metrics, you got to be mindful of what you're looking at. So like cost per lead can be one of those where you go, okay, it's really cheap it's cheaper to cold call than it is to direct mail. Well, it's cheaper to text message than it is to cold call. Okay. And then it's cheaper to do ringless voicemail than it is to do any of those, or email, right? Would be the cheapest. But so we look at cost per lead, but we also look at like cost per acquisition, like meaning, for example, for texting, we might have 300 leads to process for every one deal we do. And with direct mail, we might only have 40 leads. So the people that were responding to direct mail were more serious. Real easy for people to respond to a text, So what we found was, it might only cost us like $6 a lead for texting, and it costs us $60 a lead from direct mail. But our conversion ratio, right? We weren't having to qualify as many properties and to speak with as many leads, right? So you just have to be aware. It's not that any one is better than the other. You just have to handle the intake process of, okay, it's a cheaper cost per lead now, but I'm processing, 6 times, 7 times, whatever, as many leads. But what I've found is that you just get a different subset. Some people religiously check their mail, right? Other people, they're a younger generation. They might like Don and Edna in their 80s probably aren't going to respond to my text messaging campaign because they have a landline only. So I literally can't even text them, right? If they have a landline. But what happens when you do these other channels is you hit different subsets. Cold calling, you can hit mobiles and landlines. That a texting campaign can't hit those landlines, right? So there's just considerations, but the biggest one for us is more like the laws are always changing with these, with spam laws and everything, with cold calling, with texting, and with ringless voicemail. And a lot of this stuff, you're kind of entering like guerrilla marketing here, where if they haven't opted in and you're reaching out, there's just in the last 6 months, kind of timestamping, this episode, there's been a lot of changes there. So direct mail is kind of the one we always rely on, and we feel like the laws just don't change, and it just continues to yield us deals. But we will absolutely exploit the other channels while they're available. And they're all cheaper, faster, better than direct mail. Meaning, if I'm texting or cold calling, I could have leads today. If I start a direct mail campaign, it's going to be a week or two before anybody gets my letter. So there's pros and cons. And generally, it's just a real intentional decision of what do I want my intake process and my operations team to look like? And how do I want them to process it?
Yeah, that's very helpful to think through, especially the expense of the lead. But there's so many things that we could talk about. I feel like I'd love to hear about your team and how you've scaled and some of those things, but we're running out of time today, or running low on time. Maybe we'll have you back and we can dive into a number of those things in the future. But I want to jump to a few final questions that I ask, most investors that come on the show, and specific to obviously your niche in land investing. What's your prediction over the next 6, 12, 18 months? What everybody asks, right? That's what they want to know from the experts that are on the show. And what I typically say is, well, no one has a crystal ball. We know that. However, what we believe is going to happen affects what we do, right? Whether we're
Yeah.
buying or selling. And so what would you say, what do you think is going to happen and how's that affecting what you're doing?
Well, what I would say is before kind of as the pandemic started, what I was hearing from all the brightest minds I follow was that, everybody was going to lose their jobs. And especially like retail and some of these, industries that were more affected by the shutdowns, right? Where you couldn't work remote. Um, and that you should offload, anything with a note, right? And we had a lot of notes because we sell land on payments. So what they were kind of saying is there's going to be this tsunami of foreclosures with houses, right? And that's going to affect people. If they're buying a piece of vacant land, a recreational piece of vacant land they're not living on, that's going to be one of the first payments, right? So we sold a lot of our note portfolio. And then there was a moratorium put on foreclosures. So we never had this, this tsunami of foreclosures we heard about. And guess what? Land values actually went up, just like house values. They almost doubled, right? So in hindsight, we go, oh my goodness, I wouldn't have sold any of those. I would have held everything. So even sometimes when we're following the brightest minds, that the truth is nobody knows, especially when government interferes, or we have a worldwide pandemic. There's some of these things that disrupt what we think. But what I think is that what we've seen is that rates have went up, like selling our rural land and selling land on payments is still really attractive. Americans are just trained to like low down, low monthly payment, finance, right? Everybody finances their car, their house. Like everybody's really comfortable with a down payment and a monthly payment. So we've really leaned into that with like our rural vacant land and subdividing and selling on payments because we believe that almost everybody would love to own their own property, their own piece of land. You talk to anybody, almost everybody, it's going to be in a different location, but almost everybody, light up when they think about the fact of owning their own parcel of land. And you have such a big buyer pool when you give them the option to do that with a down payment and payments. So I think that part of our business will continue to perform well. And when rates go up, it's terrible, when you're the borrower, but when you're the lender, right, it's not so bad, right? So I think we'll really lean into that side of the business of generating a lot of notes that are 10%, 10, 11% interest notes over the next, who knows, depending on administration changes or something, who knows whether we've got a couple, we might be 2 years or 6 years, of kind of recession ahead. But we feel like for our business, selling rural vacant land on payments has been really stable. But what we've also seen is that there's a housing shortage, and a lot of these builders and developers, they need land, right? They just flat out need land. So they're just being real careful and real selective. So we have to do a lot of the legwork for them and kind of present things, present like kind of readied packages with a bow on them, versus kind of getting greedy, on pricing. So we believe continuing to work with a smaller number of builders and developers and source developable land and then subdivide and sell off the rest on payments is kind of our strategy. And if the market comes back, interest rates go down, home building picks up, the answer would be, hey, we're going to lean back into like flipping those residential infill lots.
What would you say is for the passive investor listening right now, the risk of being a land investor? Like what's a couple of things, hey, they need to consider before investing, say even passively, to buy with a group that's buying land?
Well, I think knowing that the operator you're partnering with knows how to properly perform due diligence, right, and underwrite and value. We're really conservative, like we're really careful, and I think our investors appreciate that, right? Because we get in situations where as you move, especially if you're in more than one state, you have to become fluent and proficient in that area, right? So for us in Florida, wetlands, having a lot of wetlands delineation reports, surveys, soils reports. We don't perform the same due diligence in Arizona as we do in Florida, right? So partnering with an operator that takes a long view, I feel like, and knows how to perform, their due diligence, and maybe even somebody that will allow you, potential to partner beyond just like a preferred return, right? Sometimes sharing the profits, right? So that everybody's vested. I think a lot of passive investors seek those opportunities where they go, hey, I can get a return all day long, but it'd be pretty neat to get that return and, share part of the profits.
For sure. What do you see as the biggest challenge in your niche right now?
Yeah, I think these adjusting to, like we talked about, these ever-changing laws like the marketing, if you built your business on texting and then you were kind of at a standstill for a couple, 3 months, well, we worked through, laws. So I think really the outbound marketing, that's the channel thing. As things like that come up, you have to know how to adapt, and adjust to it. But the other thing, our biggest enemy is always, I feel like interest rates, right? They just have such an impact on the cost of capital and buyer behavior. So, you know what I mean? So I feel like really it almost always just comes down to interest rates and buyer demand. And then we have to adjust to that.
I wanted to go back to one question I briefly mentioned earlier. I wanted you to be able to elaborate on it, because as we're talking about like the next 6, 12, 18 months and what to expect, and even you all are going into some lending and even some syndicating, you all buying larger stuff, and what's going to still, what do you think is going to help the successful in this niche stand out, right, over the next 2 to 5 years, maybe even as it gets more competitive, right? But what's going to be that thing that you see as, hey, and especially as you've coached numerous clients, and students to be successful, I think you probably already have a good idea of, hey, I see these qualities or these things, have helped this handful to be more successful than most.
Yeah. Well, I think with anything, like, there's no shortage of information, right? I could share, a blueprint, a strategy, but how many listeners would act on it, right? So, action takers are always rewarded. But one word would be consistency, right? Like, most people aren't persistent and consistent, with their inputs, that they'll get excited, motivated about something, put some effort into it, and then it ebbs and flows. And I think just being consistent is the difference. Like, for us, it's consistent with marketing, being consistent. And then I think like approaching it like relational versus transactional. So that's something that just absolutely never changes, right? Regardless of economy, is being able to pick up the phone and connect with guys in your network, whether it's surveyors, agents, brokers, talking to you about syndications, right? Like that human piece of it. I think a lot of people approach it transactional and financial, and they dismiss or overlook the the relationship side of it, and nurturing those relationships and digging your wells before you're thirsty, right? Versus, just reaching out to somebody you haven't talked to for 2 years because all of a sudden you need something, right?
For sure. No, it's it's always great advice, right? Even the consistency component. It's like doing a podcast for 2,000 days straight, right? It's the massive consistency that's really paid off there. Well, Travis, I want to transition to even a few like more questions about just you personally as a entrepreneur and business owner, but what are some of the most important metrics that you track? And I ask that, it could be professionally, it could be in the business, hey, these types of deals, this many mailers, whatever, or it could be how many mornings you exercise or your bench press number. What's really the most important metrics just for you every day?
Yeah, well, for metrics have become more and more important. The first 2 years, I would say, in business, all we tracked was really like revenue and ROI, right? Because again, this was not in my area of expertise. I was learning, right? I was a project manager, right? I knew the timeline, the dependencies, I knew everything, but as far as the financial piece and especially marketing metrics, I didn't know what to track. What we track real close now is like cost per acquisition, meaning like how much marketing do we have to send out to get a deal? And then how much profit are we making on that? Because you'd be surprised, like you you do these deals, you do like, we'll do a waterfront lot flip for $300,000, right? And then we'll do a subdivide for a couple 100,000. And they're the ones that stand out in your brain, right? Is like the big deals. But then like when we pulled the numbers, like last year, we just had a high number of these like buy for 20, sell for 55 type of deal. You know what I mean? So those were kind of the deals, right? That really like kept the lights on, that pay the bills, was these buy for, I'd say 20, sell for 55 or 60-ish, around there. 2 or 3 of those deals a month. Okay. And it probably takes, about 5,000 units of mail, right, for each deal. We figure about $3,000 was our like cost per acquisition, right? 3,000 in marketing would get us a deal that, would ultimately end up netting us like 25K, right?
I'll take that ratio all day long.
Yeah. Return on ad spend. I just lie and I tell people it's 5 to 7% on our ROAS, our return on ad spend. It's usually 10 to 12, but I just say 5 to 7 because nobody believes you. You just say that. But yeah, it's usually 10 to 12. But response rate, lead conversion rate are our metrics, and then cost per acquisition, right, are really the metrics we track. And then even now, as we're doing more deals, we're starting to look at things like negotiating commissions more with agents, because after paying a $250,000 in commissions in a year, selling properties, you start to go, okay, even renegotiating from 8 to 6, right, or 8 to 7, or 10 to 8, depending on the value of properties. Every little bit matters as a an operator or business owner.
What are some habits, Travis, that you are disciplined about that have produced a higher return for you?
I think for me, when I start to get worried or stressed or concerned about something, like I feel like just fast action, like just not sitting there thinking about it, just going, okay, like what's the root cause of this stress or this worry, right? What's the root cause of this, and then what action can I take that will kind of starve this fear and doubt or worry out? Because early on, I found there was a tendency to kind of do that, like worry about the unknown or stress about what might happen, but ultimately I found that action is kind of the antidote to that. So for me, I think that's really my habit. As a dad of 3, a fourth on the way. We got 3 boys, and I've got a fourth joining us here in a couple months. The trying to get into that entrepreneur routine or habit of drinking the kale smoothie and doing yoga and working out every day, right? That lasted about 2 days, right? And then, a kid comes in and jumps in bed and disrupts the routine, right? So I don't so much model myself off of other entrepreneurs. I go, hey, what works for us and our family? And that might be waking up early and my wife and I taking the dog for a walk, spending some times in the backyard playing basketball with the kids, right? So my routine is very much more of like a family guy than your, the influencer or entrepreneur, right? But to me, that's how I view success, right? Is being present and being a dad and a husband.
I so appreciate you saying that. And I know the listeners have probably gotten tired of hearing me talk about that, because I would agree with that completely. It's like, father, long before business, right?
And it might have been, at 20, 24, or 25, right?
That's right.
At a different age, there's more vanity, there's more ego. So I certainly think, priorities are different, but yeah.
Yeah, we can, and I'm as guilty as anybody. We can easily lose focus, right? We can get so, I can get so consumed with the next business thing that we're pursuing or whatever, and I can get excited about that and love doing it. But man, it can cost a lot if you're not thinking about what's most important and why you're doing it.
Ambition is a tough thing to kind of tame or tamper, because those feel like the goalposts just keep moving. As you accomplish your goals, you just keep moving. It's hard to know sometimes when enough is enough, when you see all this opportunity out there.
What would you say is the number one thing, though, that's contributed to your success?
I think one-to-one relationships and time. Like I have, of all the, whenever I do a bio or we do something for the book or press or podcast or something, and they kind of like go, hey, like, what's your one bullet point? that means the most to you, right? And you're big. And to me, it's like and it was a couple of years ago, it was 1,000 one-on-one coaching calls I've completed. We're probably at 1,300 now. It's the fact that like one-on-one, I've fired up the computer, well over 1,000 times and given people my time and attention and help them with their business and try to accomplish their goals. So I think we're kind of told like do things one to many, things that scale, right? But honestly, I feel like my reputation and our brand and our success has been built on just like working with people one-on-one and getting them true results, right? And that's led to so many referrals, right? And just a very organic, brick by brick, kind of built a pretty sizable community of land investors that way. But I think just the one-to-one approach and kind of discarding that idea of only do things that scale, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The last question, Travis, has always been, and maybe you just answered this, but I'll let you elaborate, is how do you like to give back?
I think for me, it was well before I had any money, it was time, so it's kind of always been like, meaning for me, that was like how felt I could serve people best was giving them my time, sharing my expertise, and feeling like I didn't have any other talents to offer, but I felt like, this is the one thing I know I can do, right? I can help you. And although it's building a business that's based on revenue and income and real estate, ultimately that allows people to take their families on vacation, to send their kids to whatever school they want, things like that. So I feel like through just giving people my time, that it's impacted a lot of people. It's changed people's lives. I've shared strategies, and then I've had clients go out and do better than my case study that I shared, right? Improve upon my strategies. You know what I mean? So I think it's really rewarding to see people take action and put to use the advice you've shared and see how it impacts their family. For us, just the ability, 10 years ago, the idea of going full time was really a big goal of mine. I hadn't even thought at the time like things like being able, right now we send our kids to private school, all of them go to a Christian private school that was out of reach, not even on the table for discussion, 10 years ago. So just the ability to do that and to help others do things like that may seem like small things, but have a big impact, on your family, are really what make a difference for me. And I feel like, make a difference from other people. So yeah, my wife jokes is we get gift card. People will mail gift cards all the time, right, to restaurants and stuff. Like, thanks for helping me, and we just get all these gift cards. So I must be helping somebody, right? We must be doing something right.
No doubt about it. You definitely helped a ton of people in this space and in real estate, and helped us today, Travis. I just want to thank you personally for your time today, and even a lengthier commitment today to sharing so much about your niche, your specialty. I mean, a place that you are definitely the expert and as far as land investing and buying and now even larger assets of land, larger pieces of land, and so I'm very grateful for you just laying that out for us today. What that is and how you're doing it, how you're finding it, man. How the importance of the follow up call and all these things that I feel like as a passive investor listening, they need to know these things as they may invest personally or with a group like yours as well. And so how can listeners get in touch with you? I know you have like we happily mentioned somewhere in the show, you got a great book. I would say probably the top book in this space. As far as investing in land. How can they find that? How can they get in touch with you and learn more about you and even potentially investing alongside you?
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. You go to Amazon and it's The Land Investors Playbook. Okay, Travis King, The Land Investors Playbook. Also got a website, thelandinvestorsplaybook.com. My kids got a big kick out of this, Whitney, because they said, "Dad, how much are you selling the book for?" And I said, "Well, it's 99 cents." And my 15-year-old said, "Dad, you're a terrible businessman." He says, "You're a terrible businessman. 99, so the book was something that took a couple of years, and we're thrilled to kind of bring it to market. But the kids got a big kick out of it. And
coming from the 15-year-old, right? You're a terrible businessman.
Yeah, you're a terrible businessman. 99 cents, Dad. But fortunately, it without any paid ads or anything, it's way outperformed what we expected. Land's a niche itself, and then land flipping and stuff's a sub niche. So we're real happy with it. But you can pick it up on Amazon, the Land Investors Playbook, and you can learn more about the book or me by just going to travisking.com. We've got a number of training programs, and then again, like we talked about, opportunities to get in on projects as well.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.